Some childhood memories fade with time. Others stay frozen in place, untouched by the years. This is one of those memories. Even now, when I think about it, I can picture every detail with unsettling clarity. The dim light, the silence, the shape standing in the darkness, and the scream that shattered the night. I was 10 years old when it happened. It was my very first sleepover, something I had been looking forward to for weeks. My friend Jordan had invited me to spend the night at his house, and to a kid our age, his home felt like paradise. The best part was the basement. It was enormous compared to anything I had seen before. Half of it was a gaming area filled with consoles, old beanbags, and 2 large couches where we planned to sleep. The other half disappeared into darker corners where storage boxes and shelves sat beneath exposed ceiling beams. At 10 years old, none of that seemed creepy. It just seemed cool. That evening was exactly what every kid hopes a sleepover will be. We played video games for hours, challenged each other to impossible levels, and laughed so hard our stomachs hurt. Every time we heard footsteps upstairs, we quickly lowered our voices before Jordan's parents reminded us that it was getting late. Midnight came and went, then 1 o'clock. Neither of us wanted the night to end. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with us. We turned off the games, tossed some blankets onto the couches, and collapsed where we were. Neither of us bothered brushing our teeth. We were 10-year-old rebels, and that seemed far more important than dental hygiene. I remember hearing Jordan mumble something before rolling over. A few moments later, the basement fell quiet. The hum of electronics blended with the distant sounds of the house settling. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Outside, wind brushed softly against the windows. I drifted off almost instantly. At the time, it felt like a completely normal night. Looking back now, I think that was the last moment either of us felt truly comfortable in that house. Because sometime later, in the middle of the night, I woke up, and standing in the darkness was something I still can't explain. When I opened my eyes, I had no idea what time it was. The basement was almost completely dark. For a few seconds, I just lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what had woken me. Everything was silent. Jordan was still asleep on the other couch. The house above us seemed motionless. Then I noticed the television. It was still on, not displaying a show, not showing a menu, just a blank screen. The faint glow it produced barely illuminated the room, but it was enough to reveal outlines and shadows. The couches, the shelves, the staircase leading up to the first floor. I remember blinking several times, trying to clear the sleep from my eyes. That's when I saw it. Something was standing near the far corner of the basement, right beside the stairs. At first I assumed it was a piece of furniture, maybe a coat rack, maybe stacked boxes. But the longer I looked, the less sense that explanation made. The shape was too tall, far too tall. Even through the darkness, I could tell it stretched upward almost to the ceiling. It wasn't wide like a shelf or bulky like a pile of boxes. It seemed narrow and upright, almost like a person, except impossibly tall. I couldn't make out details. To this day, I can't accurately describe what it looked like. Every time I've tried, the memory slips away. All I can remember is the overwhelming feeling that whatever I was looking at didn't belong there. I stared at it, and it seemed to stare back. My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The basement suddenly felt much larger than it had earlier that evening. The darkness seemed deeper. Every shadow appeared alive. I wanted to sit up. I wanted to wake Jordan. I wanted to run upstairs. Instead, I stayed frozen beneath my blanket. The shape never moved. At least I don't remember it moving. That somehow made it worse. Because if it had moved, maybe I could have convinced myself it was something ordinary. Instead, it remained perfectly still, silent, watching. And then, without warning, the television clicked off. The sound was small, just a simple electronic click. But in that moment, it felt deafening. The television's faint glow vanished instantly. 1 second I could see the outline near the stairs. The next second, the basement was swallowed by complete darkness. I can't fully describe the fear that rushed through me. It wasn't the kind of fear that makes you scream. It was the kind that locks every muscle in place. The kind that convinces you that moving even an inch would be a terrible mistake. I squeezed my eyes shut. My blanket suddenly felt paper thin. The darkness around me felt enormous. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and uneven. I tried to slow it down, afraid that whatever stood near those stairs might hear me. Every tiny sound became magnified. The faint hum of the house, the distant groan of settling wood, The rustle of fabric whenever I shifted slightly. I kept expecting footsteps. I kept expecting to hear something moving across the basement floor. But there was nothing. Just silence. An awful, endless silence. I don't know how long I lay there. Minutes felt like hours. My eyes remained shut, so tightly they started to hurt. Every instinct told me not to look, not to check whether the figure was still there, because a part of me was terrified that if I opened my eyes, I would find it standing much closer. Even now, decades later, that's the detail that unsettles me most. The uncertainty, not knowing whether the thing I saw was real, not knowing whether it stayed in that corner, or whether it moved while I lay there pretending to sleep. Eventually, exhaustion must have taken over. I don't remember deciding to go back to sleep. I don't remember opening my eyes again. The next thing I remember is being ripped awake by a sound so sudden and horrifying that it instantly erased every thought from my mind. A scream. A raw, terrified scream. Not from outside. Not from the basement. From upstairs. The scream echoed through the house with such force that it felt like the walls themselves shook. I sat bolt upright. Across the room, Jordan was already awake. For a split second, we just stared at each other. Neither of us said a word. We didn't have to. Something was terribly wrong. The screaming continued. It wasn't the kind of scream someone makes after a bad dream. It sounded genuinely terrified. Jordan launched himself off the couch. I followed immediately. We sprinted toward the stairs, taking them two at a time. The house that had felt warm and familiar only hours earlier suddenly felt strange and hostile. The hallway upstairs was dimly lit. The scream had stopped. Now we could hear crying. As we ran toward his parents' bedroom, my stomach tightened. Jordan reached the door first. His mother was sitting upright on the bed. She was crying uncontrollably. Her face looked pale and shocked. Jordan's father was moving frantically around the room, throwing aside blankets, opening closets, checking every corner. "What happened?" Jordan shouted. Neither parent answered immediately. His father looked like a man searching for an intruder. He pulled open drawers, checked behind furniture, and scanned every shadow in the room. His mother's eyes remained fixed on the bedroom doorway, the same doorway she had apparently been staring at when she woke up. Jordan's father suddenly pushed past us and rushed into the hallway, then through the rest of the house. Doors opened, lights switched on, footsteps thundered across floors. For the next several minutes, he searched everywhere. Every room, every closet, every bathroom, every possible hiding place. The house was thoroughly checked, then checked again. Nothing. No stranger. No burglar. No sign that anyone had entered. No sign that anyone had left. The doors were secure. The windows were secure. There were no footprints. No broken locks. No evidence whatsoever. As a 10-year-old, I didn't fully understand what was happening. I just knew something had frightened Jordan's mother badly enough to make her scream in the middle of the night. And whatever she had seen seemed to have vanished completely. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Nobody got any more sleep. The atmosphere inside the house had changed completely. Every room felt tense. Every shadow seemed suspicious. Nobody had answers. And the strangest part was that I never told anyone about what I had seen in the basement. Not that night. Not for a long time. I kept the memory to myself. But years later, I would learn something that made that decision feel much more significant. Jordan and I remained friends as we grew older. Years passed. The sleepover became one of those strange childhood memories that occasionally resurfaced during conversations about scary experiences. Most of the time, we laughed about it, at least on the surface, but neither of us ever completely forgot that night. One evening, years later, the subject came up again. We were older by then, old enough to look back at childhood events with a different perspective. I asked him whether his parents had ever figured out what caused his mother's panic. The smile immediately disappeared from his face. He paused for a moment before shaking his head. Then he told me something I hadn't known. His mother still didn't like discussing that night, even after all those years. According to Jordan, the subject made her visibly uncomfortable. Whenever someone brought it up, she usually changed the conversation or dismissed it entirely. But there had been one occasion when she revealed a little more. Just once, Jordan told me she admitted seeing a figure standing by the bedroom door. A tall figure, dark, silent, watching. The moment he said those words, I felt a chill run through me, because suddenly the image from the basement returned with complete clarity. The corner by the stairs, the impossible height, the feeling that something was staring back at me. I hadn't described my experience to her. She hadn't described hers to me, yet the details felt disturbingly similar. A tall, dark figure, standing silently in the room, watching. To this day, there has never been an explanation. No intruder was found. No evidence was discovered. No one could prove that anything had actually been there. Maybe I was a frightened 10-year-old who misinterpreted shadows in the dark. Maybe Jordan's mother woke from a nightmare and briefly confused a dream with reality. Those explanations are certainly possible. But every time I revisit that memory, one fact keeps bothering me. We both saw something, in different parts of the house, during the same night. And neither of us knew what the other had experienced until years later. I still remember that basement. I still remember the television's faint glow. I still remember the shape standing beside the stairs. And whenever I think about Jordan's mother opening her eyes to find a tall, dark figure watching from her bedroom doorway, I can't help wondering the same thing I wondered all those years ago. If there was nobody in the house that night, then what exactly were we looking at?